5 timeless fairy tales. But if everything changed, what would happen? Pinocchio's lies, Peter Pan's fate, a cursed princess, a sleepless beauty, and a fisherman's wish. This is What If, Season 2.
Have you ever heard the story of Pinocchio? Everyone remembers the wooden puppet who longed to be a real boy, the nose that grew longer with every lie, and the lessons about honesty and courage. But what if the story had unfolded differently? What if his lies didn't make his nose grow at all? What if every lie he told had became the truth? Imagine a world bent and broken by the careless words of a child, a place where shadows turned into reality and truth lost its meaning. Today, we will step into that world and follow the journey of a boy whose lies could reshape everything. Geppetto carved late into the night. He wasn't shaping a nose or hands so much as a hollow where a child's laughter might live. Outside, sea salt and warm bread scented the alley. When the blue star flared, he whispered, "If wood can listen, become my son." The dark seemed to nod. On the workbench, the puppet blinked. Wooden cheeks caught starlight. Somewhere the old man's heart thrummed like a string being tuned. The blue fairy arrived as a seam of light. Pinocchio, she named the boy who had just learned to breathe. The world is made of words. Speak truth. The world holds still. Tell a lie. The world bends to your mouth. Geppetto panicked. Will his nose grow? She shook her head. No. What lengthens is the shadow of that lie. Beware, or you'll turn a shadow into night. Pinocchio blinked. Joints clicked softly. He didn't understand weight yet, only the thrill of being called by a name. On the first morning, the shop door jammed. Geppetto sighed. The lock is ancient. Pinocchio grinned. This lock isn't locked. He joked. Then, click! The bolt sprang. They stared, stunned. Don't speak carelessly, Geppetto warned, eyes shining anyway. In the street, Pinocchio kept testing. It won't rain. Clouds tore like paper. The cat is not hungry. It stopped stalking birds and sprawled like a plump otter. Each thin lie tugged the whole day forward like silk thread. The teacher asked for homework. Pinocchio had forgotten. Snickers. He blushed. I did it. At once, a neat notebook appeared in his bag. The class gasped. The teacher froze. But the ink remembered nothing of last night. It merely impersonated memory. At home, Geppetto listened, proud and worried. Son, imitation can look like truth, but refuses responsibility. Pinocchio nodded, then smirked in secret. The convenience of lying is a new pillow, too soft not to lean on. Stromboli clapped when he saw Pinocchio perform. The boy will sell out. After opening night, they locked him in a cage for trying to go home. Pinocchio sniffled. This cage isn't real. Metal dissolved into air. Bars became mirage. He slipped through like smoke. He ran under dark awnings, buoyant. Power made his feet downy light. At a corner, a beggar extended a tin. Pinocchio murmured, "You're not poor." By morning, the man was gone, along with anyone's memory of him. Rumors raced. The mayor summoned them. "We need stability," he winked. "Try no taxes to cheer the crowd?" Geppetto stiffened. "No," Pinocchio faltered, then whispered, "Tomorrow has no taxes." Streets erupted, but the granaries thinned. Tax clerks vanished with ledgers. Toll bridges, suddenly free, had no keepers and dropped a span. The mayor blamed accidents. Pinocchio avoided mirrors. He began to grasp. Each lie is a hammer, striking the nail of law. The wood groans. Candlewick coaxed. Pleasure Island. No one turns into a donkey there. Pinocchio tossed off. Right. No one becomes a donkey. The lie drifted across the docks like carnival sugar. That night, children wrecked the fair, faces sticky. By morning, not a child sprouted ears. They roared with glee. But in the stables, carters and laborers grew ears and tails. The mute, the widowed, the poor. Helpless brays split the air. Pinocchio heaved. The burden shrugged off, the children fell on the weakest. The blue fairy appeared in a lamplight corner. "You've learned to translate suffering," she said, "but not to lessen it." Pinocchio cried, "I meant well." "Switching off the lamp isn't light," she answered. "Your lies become true, but soulless. They live by stealing force from someone else." She handed him a blue thread. "Tie this to your words and see whom they drag." He pocketed it with trembling fingers, heart heavy as wet stone. Hearing Geppetto had gone to sea to search for him, Pinocchio ran to the shore. The sky churned. "The sea has no storm," he said. Waves fell asleep. Wind died. Boats sat like stones. Next day, fish wouldn't bite. Fishermen baked under sun, stomachs clawing. Pinocchio saw the blue thread stretched to the water, tied to sailors' wrists. "Give back the wind!" they cried. But he stammered before the choice. Wind returns and storms rise. Wind dies, and hunger rises. Truth wasn't a light switch. News cracked the town. Geppetto had been swallowed by Monstro, a fish the size of a church. Pinocchio borrowed a skiff, rowed into the dark maw. In the belly, father and son held each other, sobbing, laughing. "How do we get out?" Geppetto trembled. Pinocchio pressed the slick wall. "This is not a fish. This is a wooden door." The gut became pine planks. Flesh turned to fragrant grain. A door opened onto the beach. They stepped out as Monstro dwindled into mist. Yet on the horizon, part of the sea became forest. The lie had carved a new maze. News of the law-fixing boy turned Pinocchio into a wish engine. People queued. "My house is not sick." Debts don't exist. Bad memories never happened. Each lie wove a new patch of reality, streets overlapping streets. Half the town remembered rain, the other half never had rain. Maps split like eggshells. Geppetto sat on the stoop, face in hands. "Son," he whispered, "you're turning truth into a museum." Pinocchio, for the first time, felt fear of what he'd made. The king's envoy arrived. "The realm needs order. Say no war, no famine. Peace will reign." Geppetto pleaded, "Spare my boy." Pinocchio was taken to court before the throne. He said, "There are no soldiers at the border." The army sifted into sand, men vanished, and children in villages lost fathers in memory. "No famine," he added. Storehouses filled, but taste turned to ash. Fields stopped growing from false fullness. Peace held like a painted scene. The fairy did not come. Pinocchio tried something. "I'm only a puppet." Nothing changed. "I am wrong." Nothing. Truth fell like a rusty nail. No one stooped to pick it up. "So," he whispered, "truth is mute while lies sing." Geppetto held him. "Truth doesn't sing because it works." On the bench, he set the blue thread. Each time he spoke, it flew like a grappling hook and caught someone. Pinocchio realized he'd been dragging the world to its feet for applause that felt hollow. In a nook of the wooden maze by the sea, Pinocchio met an old net weaver. "Who are you?" "The one who mends what you rip." She showed him a net of blue spliced knots. "Each knot is a burden someone carries for you." "How to stop?" he asked. She tapped his chest. "Gather all consequences into one place that volunteers to carry them. Then your lies won't be cheap." He began to see. Point the arrow back to himself, the single place he truly owned. On the square steps, Pinocchio faced citizens, courtiers, even the king in silence. He spoke truth. I have done harm. No wind stirred. Then he lied. From now on, every lie I tell lands only on me. The sky stalled. The blue thread snapped tight and cinched around him. Instantly, his nose grew like a mast. His back weighted like millstone. No debt etched across his skin. Brays at the stables faded as people became people again. The world exhaled, and he shouldered it. Pinocchio came home, dragging his steps like a boat. Geppetto shaved his nose so it wouldn't snag. Do you regret it? No, but I'm afraid. Good, said Geppetto. Fear teaches us to go slow. They ate dry toast. Ash fell softly. At the door, Candlewick peered in. Buddy, my mother's sick. Please say she's not sick. Pinocchio eyed the blue thread. If he spoke, the weight would crush him further. He knelt. I'll work, no lie. They fetched medicine, begged the doctor, kept watch by her bed. A new rumor spread. The boy's lies are useless now. Fewer knocks at the door. The mayor sulked, the king grumbled, but at the market people paid true prices. Pinocchio hauled his burden around, mending bridges, stitching nets, speaking nothing. Oddly, his long nose snagged less when he used it as a lever for water barrels. The carved words hurt less when he carried bricks beside masons. Hear it? Geppetto asked. Pinocchio cocked his ear. In the fall of sweat, a tune, wood singing when put to right work. The blue fairy returned, this time without Blaze. You've changed the ethos of lying, she said. Still a craft, but a different aim. Does truth still matter? He asked. When lies once made everything? Truth's value is that it needs no applause, she said. It keeps banks for the river to run. She touched his brow. Someday, if you can say one truth you're willing to live entirely by, you'll be a real boy. Not for me, for you. Before dawn, Pinocchio sat beside sleeping Geppetto. He whispered, I love you, not to be forgiven, not to become real. I love you even if I remain wood-bowed under my own lies. Wind slipped through the door and brushed the carved words on his skin. They faded like chalk in drizzle. His wooden nose shrank a little, not gone, just enough to stop hurting. Geppetto woke and ruffled his hair. I heard. No bells, no fireworks, only first light and the smell of bread. Years later, children asked, if lies have power, does truth still matter? He smiled. Lies make worlds easily. People adore that. Truth keeps the world, which is hard. Few applaud. Living is standing in the right place between them. Speak less, do more, and let love decide the cost you'll bear. When the children had gone, he stood before the shop and listened to the grain hum. Somewhere, the blue fairy smiled too. Night needs no fireworks, only someone to keep the ember. Everyone knows the legend of Peter Pan, the boy who could fly, who led the lost boys, who swore he would never grow up. His laughter, his adventures, his endless flight through skies that never aged. What if Peter Pan grew up and became the man most afraid of time? Imagine a storm-torn sea, a ship tossed against waves like mountains. At its prow stands a figure cloaked in shadow, his left hand replaced by a silver hook that gleams like a curse. He leans toward a cracked mirror nailed to the mast, and for one fleeting heartbeat, his scarred reflection fades. Staring back is the bright-eyed grin of the boy who once ruled the skies. The storm roars louder, mocking, and the truth strikes like lightning. Captain Hook was once Peter Pan. Peter climbed the tallest tree of Neverland, fingers trembling on rain-slick branches. His heart pounded with desperate hope, as if will alone could defy gravity. I can still fly, he whispered, voice cracking with fear and resolve. He leapt into the storm, arms spread like wings. For years, the wind had always caught him, carried him as though the island obeyed. But this time, the air betrayed him. His stomach lurched, the ground surged closer, and the sky gave no embrace. Branches clawed his skin before the earth struck like an enemy. Pain ripped through him, sharper than steel. Pixie dust spilled from his pockets, not rising in golden sparks, but drifting gray and lifeless, like ashes of a dead fire. Peter lay gasping, mud and rain soaking him. Why can't I fly anymore? His voice broke, swallowed by the storm. Tinker Bell darted to his side, wings trembling, her glow flickering weak as a candle in the wind. She hovered above him, her light sputtering with each breath. Tears like sparks welled in her eyes before falling into the mud. Peter, you're growing up. That's why. Her voice quivered, fragile as glass. Peter shook his head violently, rain dripping from his hair. No, I don't want to. I won't. His voice carried both fury and terror. But Tinker Bell's light dimmed further, her glow shrinking. Grown-ups don't fly, Peter. That's the price of time. It always takes. London night pressed against the darling's window. Peter's breath fogged the glass as he pressed close. Inside, Wendy rocked a cradle, her hair longer, her face lined with years. A fire burned softly, casting golden light across her gentle but weary eyes. Each time he returned, she had drifted further from the girl who once believed in magic. Wendy, he whispered, his voice heavy with longing. He remembered dancing with her shadow, the laughter they shared, promises whispered under stars. Now only silence answered. She did not turn. Perhaps she no longer heard the boy at her window. Perhaps she had chosen not to. Perhaps she had forgotten him altogether. Back on the island, shadows spread like rot. Forests withered into skeletal remains, rivers bled black, and the songs of mermaids sank beneath the waves. Once vivid skies dulled, as though even the stars had abandoned their posts. The lost boys huddled together, shivering, their faces no longer round with innocence but sharp with fear. One clutched his chest, whispering, "Peter, are we fading away?" His voice trembled like a candle about to die. Neverland had lived because Peter never grew. Now because he did, the island itself began to die with him. Peter stared at his hands, longer now, scarred, stronger, alien. He clenched them until his nails drew blood. "No, I won't be like them. I won't." His voice cracked with desperation. That night, under a bruised sky, he stole a ship from the cove. The waves raged, but he sailed alone, eyes burning with fury and fear. Neverland shrank behind him, its dying forest and fading laughter swallowed by the storm. The boy who would never grow up was gone. Only a shadow of the man remained. The sea whispered his new name, carrying it through the dark. Hook. Neverland cracked like a mirror struck by fate. A pale seam split the island from cliff to reef, where two climates collided. East with warm wind and laughter, west with cold rain sowing sea to sky. Birds wheeled and stopped at the line. Even clouds refused to cross. At that border stood two Peters. The boy, barefoot, dagger flashing, hair wild, carrying the scent of sap and smoke. The man taller, shoulders bent by unseen weight, eyes shadowed by sleepless years, smelling of salt and iron. Between them, the ground trembled. They did not speak. The boy's chest rose quick with flight, the man's slow with storms. The island groaned as if their coexistence ripped its story in two. On the storm side, men gathered like a tide of regret sailors with salt-bleached beards, and boys who had aged too far, lost boys, fallen from the sky with no way back. They came in torn coats, cracked hands, eyes that flinched at laughter. Their leader bore a silver hook where a hand should be. When he clenched it, rain hissed on the metal. His voice left no room for refusal. After midnight, no talk of the past, never say fly, never look east too long. At night, they swore loyalty over a flickering lantern. "He is no boy. He is the captain," one whispered, and the rest repeated until it sounded true. The name Hook rolled across black water like a tolling bell, a curse no tide could wash away. On the sunlit side, Peter the boy looped above golden treetops, scattering dust like dawn in his hands. The lost boys cheered, swinging on vines, mouths sticky with fruit, knees green with grass. They believed with all they had, as children do, but belief has weight. When Peter landed, laughter snagged on a thorn of doubt. He had seen the man's eyes, his own, only older and heavier. Tinker Bell hovered at his shoulder, her glow thin as lace. "Keep moving," she whispered. "Don't stare at shadows. They stare back." Peter smiled for the others. "We'll feast, we'll fly, we'll never grow old," he cried, and the boys shouted. Yet when he looked east, the island's seam tugged at him like a hidden hook under the skin. Dusk sifted through the forest, turning branches into blades. Hook came from the west, with steel drawn, boots crushing bruised leaves. The boy dropped from the canopy with a laugh that tried to sound fearless. Their weapons clashed, the sound sending birds screaming. Peter moved quick as thought, Hook heavy as judgment. Sparks leapt and died on the wet bark. "You're a lie," Hook said, breath close enough to taste salt and iron. "Childhood can't last." "And you're the coward who betrayed it," Peter snapped, knife flashing for the wrist with the hook. They broke apart as the forest shook, as if the island itself rejected the fight. For a moment they only listened. To wind, to rain, to the thin silence where a boy's faith began to fray. From the sea rose the crocodile, vast and ruinous, scales like plates of old armor, eyes cold as coins. Its belly ticked with the clock it had swallowed long ago. Tick, tock. The sound was absurd and terrifying, as if a nursery rhyme had grown teeth. Hook stiffened. The noise put cold fingers around his spine. Memory struck spray in his face. A scream, blood bright on wood, a hand vanishing to a jaw that would not stop closing. He pressed the hook into his palm until pain steadied him. Above, the boy hovered, pity and panic wrestling behind his eyes. "You fear time," he said softly, and the words cut deeper than steel. "That's why you lose." Peter climbed the sky in loops and spirals, a comet of boyhood. Dust trailed him like spilled sunrise. "I'll never grow up," he cried, and the island answered with echo upon echo. The lost boys beat drums on hollow logs and turned fear into noise. Hook's teeth ground until his jaw ached. He cut the air with his hook as if he could sever sound itself. "Down," he ordered his crew, voice low and raw. "Down the sails. Chain the cannons. If he won't come to earth, we will drag the sky to us." Clouds thickened at his words, storm obeying the man who had once commanded belief and now commanded weather. Still, the laughter kept finding its way through the rain like a map he could not burn. Under a moon the color of old wounds, Hook stood at the prow and raised his blade. Wind tore at the sails. Lanterns guttered. The crew watched with faces split between hope and fear. "If I cannot escape time," he said, each word heavy as anchor chain, "then neither will you. I will drag you into my darkness. I will prove even Peter Pan must grow old." The men shouted with him because they must, but their voices shook. In their hearts, a faint light whispered, "Let the boy win. Let something remain unbroken." Hook heard it and despised it. He gripped the rail, knuckles bone white, and swore again, this time to himself. If the child would not descend, he would climb, through storm, fear, and the ticking clock, to the last inch of sky. The sea became a battlefield of thunder. Hook's ship climbed and plunged against waves tall as cliffs. Lanterns swung like dying stars, throwing broken light over faces pale with fear. The crew clutched ropes with blistered hands, whispering prayers they no longer believed. At the prow, Hook stood drenched, his cloak snapping like a black wing. Lightning painted him as something risen from the deep, part man, part storm. He lifted his sword, and the rain hissed against steel. Above, Peter hovered in defiance, cutting through lightning with a child's laugh sharpened into a blade. His dagger burned with pixie fire, dust scattering in streaks of gold. One ship, one storm. A boy staring down the man he was destined to become. The whole of Neverland seemed to lean in to watch. Hook roared, charging forward with sword raised. He struck in arcs that lit the rain, each swing a year of bitterness. Peter darted through the storm, every movement quick as a lightning flash. The deck rang with steel and spark, thunder echoing their duel. "You're nothing but fear dressed as a man," Peter shouted, blade clashing hard enough to split wood. "And you're nothing but a dream clinging to dust," Hook snarled, Hook lashing out, carving sparks at the dark. The storm itself seemed to pause between their strikes, as though nature strained to choose between youth and age. Hook's attacks grew savage. He swung not just with strength, but with years of regret. Each strike a denial, each parry a memory crushed. His boots hammered the slick deck, driving Peter backward toward the mast. "I'll rip the youth from your bones, boy," Hook bellowed, spit mingling with rain. Peter panted, dagger trembling in his grip. His eyes flared. "You already did it when you grew up." The words struck harder than steel. For a heartbeat, Hook faltered, eyes clouding with the ghost of a boy he once was. The storm filled the pause with thunder. Peter sprang upward, belief alone giving him wings. The storm bent around him, rain falling sideways as if refusing to touch. For a heartbeat, he was infinite, a star no sky could hold. Hook leapt after, but his boots slammed onto the deck. The weight of years dragged him down, chains invisible but unbreakable. He roared and reached, but his arm only met emptiness. In that moment, the battle was not just steel, but gravity itself, youth rising against the pull of age. Peter dove like a falcon, dagger streaking with fire. He struck Hook's sword hand. The blade spun out, vanishing into the sea. Hook reeled, clutching the rail, lightning freezing his broken frame in stark white. His roar turned to a gasp. From the cliffs, the lost boys shouted with wild relief, "He's finished! He's finished!" Their voices mixed with thunder until it was impossible to tell which was storm and which was triumph. Hook collapsed to his knees, cloak heavy with water. His crew scattered into the dark, some diving into boats, others vanishing into mist. The man who had ruled their fear now knelt defeated. Peter stood above him, chest heaving, dagger trembling in his hand. For an instant, Neverland brightened. The forests stretched green, the rivers shimmered, the mermaids sang again. Even the stars peeked through storm clouds. Yet inside him, victory was hollow. It felt like laughing in an empty room, the sound swallowed before it touched a wall. He had won, but the weight of time still pressed, heavier than any blade. Then came the sound. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The crocodile's belly echoed across the sea. Not just a beast time itself, unkillable, unstoppable. Each tick was a hammer, each talk a chain closing tighter. Peter froze, staring at Hook's fallen body, then at his own hands. In the flicker of lightning, they looked older, veins rising, nails sharp. His breath caught, as if the future had already claimed him. Peter Pan had defeated Captain Hook. But the clock never stops. One day, the boy will grow, and when he does, he will wear the hook.
A kiss meant to break the curse, but what if it created another? Once upon a time, you've heard the tale of the Frog Prince, a spoiled princess, a golden ball, and a kiss that turned a frog back into a man. But fairy tales are tricksters. They hide secrets in the shadows. So let me ask you this. What if the kiss did not free the frog? What if the curse leapt the other way and the princess herself began to change? Skin rippling green, voice breaking into a croak. Imagine the royal halls echoing not with cheers, but with the sound of two frogs staring at each other. This is not the story you were told. What if the princess became a frog too? It began in the palace garden, where marble statues guarded the roses. The princess strolled alone, tossing her golden ball into the air, catching it with practiced ease. She adored it more than she adored people, for it never argued, never asked her to change. She laughed at her reflection in the sphere's gleam, imagining she was the brightest jewel of all. Then, splash! It slipped from her fingers and vanished into the dark water of the well. Panic struck her face. She cried out, stomping her delicate shoes against the grass, shouting for help. But no servant was near enough, and as her sobs echoed, a voice rose from below, low, wet, croaking. "Why weep so bitterly, princess?" She gasped as the frog climbed into the light, its skin glistening, its eyes wide and patient. "I can bring back your golden toy," it said, "if you will let me be your companion." Her tears ceased instantly. "Yes, yes, anything," she exclaimed. The frog studied her carefully, then spoke again. "Not just today. You must let me eat from your plate, drink from your cup, and rest upon your pillow. A friend indeed, not just in word." The princess, eager to reclaim her ball, waved her hand impatiently. Of course, whatever you wish, just fetch it now." Her voice was sharp, betraying her lack of sincerity. Yet the frog did not argue. With a sudden dive, it plunged into the well. Moments later, it returned, ball clamped between its jaws. The princess seized it with delight, twirling with joy. But her gratitude lasted no longer than a heartbeat. "Goodbye, little frog," she laughed, rushing back to the palace. Behind her, a small voice called, "Remember your promise." But she did not look back. The marble gate swallowed her, and the frog was left alone at the edge of the well. The frog sat at the well's edge, watching the marble gates close. He knew her promise was false, yet still his heart clung to hope. That night, in the castle's golden hall, the princess twirled her ball once more, laughing as though nothing had happened. But when silence fell and the moonlight spilled across her chamber, there came a sound. Knock, knock, croak. She froze. The servants opened the door, and there he was, small, damp, unyielding. "Princess," the frog croaked, "you gave me your word." She turned pale. "Send it away," she cried. But the king entered, frowning. "Daughter, if you have spoken a promise, you must keep it. Honor binds royalty more than jewels." Shamed, the princess lowered her eyes. She had no choice but to let the frog in. The banquet that night was filled with roasted meats, steaming bread, and crystal goblets of wine. The princess lifted her fork, only to hear the wet sound of feet on stone. Plop, plop, plop. The frog hopped onto the table, settling beside her plate. Gasps rose from the courtiers. She turned crimson. "This is disgraceful," she whispered. Yet the frog only dipped his tongue into her wine, tasting it solemnly, as if it were a holy pact. The king's eyes were stern. "He is your guest," he reminded her. And so she endured it, the frog eating from her plate, drinking from her cup. At night, when she fled to her bed, he followed still, asking, "May I rest by your pillow, princess?" She nearly screamed. But again, the king's command weighed heavier than her disgust. Days passed. At first she despised him, his damp skin, his croaking voice, his persistence. Yet when the halls grew quiet and no one else listened, it was the frog who told her stories, of the stars mirrored in ponds, of fireflies weaving light in the rushes, of storms that bent trees but spared the reeds. She found herself listening, even smiling. One evening, as she pushed her plate toward him without being asked, the courtiers exchanged glances. The princess had softened. She did not notice. She only heard his voice, steady and strange, and for the first time wondered, perhaps he is more than what he seems. It happened by the fountain, under the evening sky. The frog had spoken of friendship, of keeping promises, of how even small creatures carried worth. The princess stared at him, her heart heavier than she expected. "You wanted a companion," she whispered. "Then, so be it." She bent low, touched her lips to his cold, damp skin. For an instant, magic pulsed. She closed her eyes, imagining a prince unfolding before her. She thought a kiss would turn the frog into a prince, but instead it cursed her. At the fountain, beneath the evening sky, the frog spoke of friendship, of promises kept. The princess's heart softened. "You wanted a companion," she whispered. "Then so be it." She bent low, pressing her lips to his cold, damp skin. Magic surged. She closed her eyes, dreaming of a prince unfolding before her. But when she opened them, the frog remained the same. Instead, her own hands shrank. Her skin rippled green. Her voice cracked into a croak. The princess had become a frog, a kick the curse. Instead, it created another. Screams rippled through the corridors. Servants fled, guards crossed their spears, and the royal advisors argued in tight, frightened circles. On the pillar of the great hall, the torchlight jittered. Two small shapes cast long shadows. The princess, now a frog, tried to speak, but only a raw croak escaped. The king approached, crown heavy with disbelief. He looked from the unchanging frog prince to his transformed daughter. The weight of duty pressed deeper than sorrow. "Find the court magus," someone cried. "Summon the healers," cried another. But the magus, when he arrived, shook his head. "This is no common spell. It binds not to a kiss, but to intention." The magic turned toward the heart that moved. The king's hands trembled. The princess, shivering on the cold stone, glanced at the frog beside her. He did not retreat. He hopped closer, forming a shield with his small, damp body. An absurd, gentle bravery that hushed the hall louder than any command. Night gathered at the windows like ink. The princess, still dazed, crouched near the hearth to steal a little warmth. The frog prince settled beside her. No accusations passed between them. "I meant to free you," she rasped. "If I trapped myself instead, I will not ask you to fix it." The frog lifted his gaze. "Then let us hold what is ours to hold," he said. "We can choose the shape of our courage, even if we cannot choose our bodies." Silence followed. Deep, human silence, though they were not human. Finally, the princess turned to the king. With a bow as best a frog could muster, she croaked, "Father, forgive me. I must leave until I learn who I am in this skin." The king's eyes softened. He placed the crown's weight aside and knelt to the stone. "Daughter," he whispered, "honor is not the opposite of love. Go and come back whole." The gates opened to the night, to reeds and moon-silvered paths. They traveled by moonlight, leaving marble for mud, trumpets for crickets. The swamp accepted them without question. Mist rose like breath from sleeping water. Reeds clicked. Frogs chorused. The princess's first steps were clumsy. She leapt too far, misjudged the softness of moss, sank with a startled squeak. The frog prince laughed, not unkindly, and showed her how to crouch, how to spring, how to read the tremble of water for danger. "The castle teaches walls," he said. "The swamp teaches listening." They built a shelter of leaves and broad lily pads, a small dome where the rain drummed a steady lullaby. At the water's edge, beneath a sky bright with unfamiliar stars, the princess practiced the smallness of being. Small hunger, small shelter, small voice, and found that none of it made her heart smaller. When she slept, she dreamed not of lost gold, but of the soft percussion of rain and the patient light of fireflies mending the dark. Days arranged themselves into a rhythm. Dawn swims, noon stillness, twilight hunts. She learned the silver arc of a dragonfly's path, the shadow fall that meant a heron waited, the bright seam of current that would carry her home. They ate what the water gave, they rested when the wind said rest. There were humiliations, yes, a tumble into muck, a seed caught in her throat, but also small triumphs, a perfect leap, a narrow escape, a shared laugh that felt as rich as feasts once did. Before sleep, the Frog Prince told stories of his childhood, of pride that had once been a shining shield, and how it turned to lead when misfortune struck. The princess did not offer pity, she offered presence. "Thank you for not fixing me," he said once. "Thank you for not asking me to," she replied. In that simple exchange, both found a dignity the palace had not taught. Sometimes memory bruised her, a corridor washed in sun, the silk hiss of a gown, a song learned at 6. She would fall quiet, watching the pond mirror the sky until the world steadied. The Frog Prince did not rush her past the ache. He placed himself where she could see him in the same pane of water. "The mirror is wide enough for both," he said. "You do not have to choose between the girl in silk and the frog in mud." In return, she asked about the day his curse began. He spoke not of witches, but of a dinner where he mocked a servant, of a hunt where he boasted louder than the drums. "If there was a spell," he said, "perhaps I cast it myself." She did not absolve him. She laid a leaf upon the water and sent it sailing. "Then let's learn new spells," she said, "the kind that unmake what pride has made." Kindness, once practiced, multiplied. They freed a fish from a snare of reeds. Days later, a school of minnows swam ahead of them during a flood, showing the shallow path. They righted a beetle flipped on its back. That night, fireflies crowned their shelter with soft constellations. The swamp, which had seemed a tangle of threats, revealed itself as a living covenant. Give and be given to. Wordless gratitude stitched them into the place. One afternoon, a child from the village wandered too close to the marsh. The princess guided her away with patient hops, while the Frog Prince sang a silly rhyme to keep her laughing. The child waved, cheeks bright with safety. "I never knew goodness could be this ordinary," the princess said. "Ordinary," the Frog Prince smiled, "is just another word for true." And ordinary day by ordinary day, the fear that they would be frogs forever loosened its hold, not because rescue was near, but because despair had no room where purpose was. One evening, the pond was a mirror of silver. Fireflies swayed like lanterns. The princess sat on a broad lily leaf, gazing at her reflection. No crown, no jewels, only round eyes and a body meant for mud. The Frog Prince joined her, his voice soft. "Does it hurt?" he asked. She did not answer at once. Then, "It used to, I think. I have shed a skin I never knew was heavy." She turned to him, her small hand touching his damp one. "If I must be a frog forever, I am glad it is with you." He smiled with the quiet strength of someone who had waited long. "Then the curse has no power left. Love already won." The moonlight rippled around them, not as blessing, not as spell, but as witness. But love is tested in storms, not in calm. Clouds gathered, a black tide across the sky. Thunder split the swamp. Rain hammered leaves flat. The pond swelled, spilling its banks, tearing nests from branches. The princess clung to a reed, trembling as the current tugged at her legs. The Frog Prince leapt ahead, shouting above the roar, "This way!" Together they fought to reach higher ground. But the swamp they had come to love turned wild, a beast unchained. They saw creatures swept away, friends they had helped now helpless. And still they pushed on, side by side, toward the heart of the storm. In the chaos, the princess slipped. The flood yanked her away, spinning her toward a whirlpool. She cried out, only bubbles answered. The frog prince dove without thought. Through water thick with branches, he reached her, clasping her wrist. The current battered them both, tearing, dragging. He wrapped himself around her, whispering though no one could hear, "Not without you." She felt his body straining, his strength breaking, and yet, clinging together, their hearts beat one rhythm, defiance against the flood. And then, the silence after fury. The water stilled, branches settled. In the hush, a warmth spread where their hands clung. Not a kiss this time, not a bargain, but a choice to hold on even when the world tore apart. Something cracked, the unseen chains of pride, of selfishness, of fear. The swamp shimmered, fireflies rose in swarms. The magic that once demanded a transaction now bowed to devotion freely given. They thought they would be frogs forever, until love itself broke the curse. Amid the raging storm, they clung to each other, choosing not to let go, even as the flood tore around them. And in that choice, something cracked, the chains of pride, fear, and selfishness. The swamp shimmered, fireflies lit the night. Green skin peeled away like mist. Two frogs became two figures, kneeling on the muddy bank. Not by a kiss, but by devotion freely given. This is how the curse truly ended, not with magic, but with love that endured. When they returned to the castle, trumpets blared, citizens cheered. Yet, they carried with them not jewels or triumphs, but the quiet certainty born of mud and storm. The king embraced them, no crown between. "You are changed," he said. The princess answered, "Yes. I learned love is not a spell to free one soul. It is the strength to bind two." The prince added, "And sometimes, only when we accept the curse together does it end." The tale that once ended with a kiss now ended with something greater. Understanding, sacrifice, a happiness rewritten. And if you listen on quiet nights, by ponds where fireflies dance, you may still hear them. Two voices, once frogs, now human, laughing as though the swamp were still.
Everyone knows the legend: a princess, a curse, a spindle's sting, a kiss to wake the world. What if that kiss was never needed? What if the needle struck and the kingdom slept instead? Picture a hall mid-celebration, goblets raised, violins laughing. A door creaks. A moon-thin point gleams. The princess pricks her finger and draws a breath, and doesn't fall. Around her, sound unthreads, a spear rings once on stone, a baker collapses over unbaked bread, the queen sinks into a dream before reaching her child. Outside, birds glide to earth like slow snow. Silence takes the throne. Only the princess remains standing, pulse loud enough to wear his armor. She steps forward, past sleeping crowns and shuttered eyes. Fairy tales promise rescuers. Not this one. This one begins when the world closes its eyes and one girl refuses to close hers. The night of Aurora's birth should have belonged to music and wine. Laughter rose like birds from the rafters, golden banners breathed in the warm glow of 1,000 candles. Then thunder split the sky, and every instrument choked on silence. From the doorway, smoke curled into a figure cloth black as midnight, eyes the red of dying coals. She did not shout, she whispered, and the hall leaned in. On her 16th birthday, the witch said, the princess will prick her finger and fall into sleep eternal. With her, this kingdom will wither and dim. The queen clutched her child, the king reached for a sword that felt suddenly useless. The stranger's smile was a rusted hook. She vanished with the wind, leaving only ash in the candle's breath, and a clock that began to tick louder than any drum. She grew in gardens where roses were counted like hours. Spindles were outlawed, needles hidden, old women paid to forget the craft of thread. Aurora learned songs instead of secrets, kindness instead of caution, yet the castle kept its breath shallow. Each birthday brought feasts, each candle on her cake felt like a courtroom witness. Guards smiled softly but watched doorways as if doorways could bite. Aurora chased butterflies, touched sun-warmed stone, pressed her ear to the seashells that promised other worlds. Still, in the hallways, footsteps always paused at 16 whispered, and turned away. Beauty bloomed, fear did not fade. She was a bright bird kept safe in a gilded air, taught every window but never the wind. And somewhere beyond the tapestries, a wheel kept turning in a room no one would claim. On the morning of her 16th birthday, the castle wore celebration like armor. Musicians tuned, kitchens thundered, banners glowed. Yet Aurora followed a draft colder than stone, a whisper that threaded her name through dust. At the end of a corridor that seemed longer than memory, a door waited, one she had never seen open. It yielded to her palm with a sigh the room had saved for years. Cobwebs like silk veils. A spindle in the center, old wood polished by time, its wheel turning though no foot pressed the treadle. Aurora's heart argued, curiosity answered. She reached, the tip shone like a star in winter water. Flesh met fate. A sting, sharp, small, ridiculous. She flinched, expecting darkness. Instead, the darkness flinched from her, and fled into everything else. Her breath held, the room listened. Aurora did not fall. She blinked once, twice, and heard the first thud outside, then another, then a chorus. Servants slumped mid-curtsy, guards dropped spears that clanged like bells, bakers folded over bread that would never rise. The queen, running, reached with hands that went limp before they found her daughter's face. In the stables, horses slept standing, in the sky, birds forgot to flap and gently descended like leaves. A hush drowned the kingdom, thick as velvet. Aurora stepped into it and left footprints of sound. Wake, she begged, touching every shoulder she could. Warmth answered, not voices. The curse had struck, but the arrow had reversed. The only pair of eyes left open belonged to the girl everyone had tried to close. She pushed into the great hall, where light poured from stained glass in rivers of color. The twin thrones rose like mountains at sunset. Upon them, the king and queen sat as if sculpted by sleep, crowns tilted, fingers relaxed, faces emptied of thunder and laughter both. Father, Aurora said, and her voice broke in the vastness. Mother. She took their hands and felt heat without heartbeat, presence without presence. The banner sagged, the air smelled of beeswax and gone music. Her name, called in a whisper, echoed back as if the walls themselves were lonely. For the first time, Aurora recognized the shape of silence, not absence, but weight. It settled on her shoulders like a mantle she had never earned, and would now have to bear. From narrow windows she watched vines climb like handwriting across stone. Thorns the size of knives twined over gates and ironwork, stitching shut every exit. The curse was not finished, it was growing, alive, a patient siege. Aurora took a guard's sword, it felt heavier than stories made it seem. She hacked and dragged and bled, tearing a narrow mouth through the hedge. The thorns whispered as they cut, a sound like dry laughter. She stepped into a world beyond the walls and found it wearing the same sleep as within, as if the kingdom had put on a mask that fit too well. Behind her, the gate sealed, ivy sewing the wound closed again. There would be no retreat, only forward. The village square lay paused mid-breath. A merchant slept with scales in his hand, a baker dozed before bread that swelled without finishing, a child dreamed sitting up, toy horse forever mid-gallop. Even fountains thickened, water holding the shape of motion like glass. Aurora walked slowly, as if sound itself might shatter. She touched a cheek, brushed flour from a sleeve, straightened a fallen ribbon. I'll come back, she promised no one and everyone. The promise warmed her mouth even as cold gathered at her spine. Somewhere among these faces were names she knew only from songs the nurses sang. Now the songs had closed their eyes. If a kingdom can hold its breath, she thought, then I must learn how to be lungs. At first, the silence felt empty. But silence has listeners. From the fog, shapes began to crawl, shoulders of smoke, fingers like nettles, eyes glowing hotter with every beat of her fear. Aurora tightened her grip on the sword. Steel should have promised safety, but when she swung, the blade cut nothing but air. The ring closed, the fog pressing in like a coffin. A breath caught in her throat, then heat rose in her palm. A spark, a pulse, a sudden blaze. Light burst from her hand, raw and merciless, carving through mist like sunrise through storm. The shadows shrieked, scattering, their forms unmade by brilliance they could not endure. Aurora stared at her glowing hand, the sun caged beneath her skin. And for the first time, she understood, the kingdom's last fire was hers to carry. "Don't stop," a voice said, as if spoken from two rooms at once. A young man stepped from the thinning fog, the crest of a neighboring crown stitched over his heart. His eyes were glassed with sleep, yet a thin thread of waking held them open. "I should be gone with the rest," he murmured, "but something tied me here, tied me to you." He swayed, catching himself on a post, then bowed with the memory of court. "I am a prince," he added, as if apologizing for a title that helped no one. Aurora saw her loneness lean, then shift. "If you can stand," she said, "you can walk. If you can walk, you can help." He smiled like a man remembering the word yes. They tested the edges of the curse together. When Aurora stepped forward, the prince steadied. When she faltered, his hand anchored hers. He felt sleep tug his bones whenever her light dimmed. "We are lantern and wick," he joked weakly. "Then we must learn not to blow out," she answered. Maps were useless, the roads had gone to bed. But rumors survive even when men do not speak. In carvings above old wells, in tapestries chewed by mice, the same sign appeared, a thorn-crowned eye, watching from the heart of the forest. "There," the prince said, tracing it. "There," Aurora agreed, feeling the word land like an oath. Two breaths, out of sync, began to find a rhythm. The kingdom slept, the path did not. The villages lay in twilight, houses sagging under silence. A farmer slept in the furrows he'd plowed, his ox collapsed beside him. A tavern door swung open and shut, though the laughter within had frozen mid-toast. Aurora stepped over still bodies as if crossing pages of a book where every word had stopped mid-syllable. She knelt beside a child clutching a wooden soldier, its paint chipped with love, and whispered, "I will bring you back." Her voice cracked, but the promise hung solid in the unmoving air. The prince watched her, weary but steadied by her stubborn tenderness. "Every vow is a rope," he said quietly. She smiled faintly. "Then let us weave a net big enough to catch a kingdom." At the forest's heart stood ruins strangled by ivy. The temple's stones were cracked, but its carvings endured. Aurora brushed away moss to read the words carved deeper than centuries. "If the princess sleeps, the kingdom wakes. If she wakes, the kingdom sleeps." Her chest tightened, as if the air itself turned to iron. "So it was never my life alone," she whispered. The prince traced the lines with his finger, jaw set. "They chained the fate of many to the body of one. That is no prophecy, it is cruelty." Aurora's hands trembled against the stone, heat sparking again beneath her skin. The curse had chosen her as its lock, but she could feel the key humming within her ribs. Sleep found her that night, not gentle but invasive. In the dream's fog, the witch appeared, her cloak shifting like storm clouds, her eyes gleaming with cruel pity. "Close your eyes, child," she coaxed. "End your struggle. One breath, and your people will awaken. One sigh, and you will be loved again." Aurora reached toward a phantom vision, her mother's arms open, her father's smile returned. Tears blurred her sight. But beneath the sweetness lurked rot. She pulled back, gasping awake, her chest burning. The prince stirred at her cry, gripping her hand tight. "Dreams are the chains she forges," he said. Aurora nodded, trembling. Chains could bind, but chains could also be broken. Dawn's light found them weary. Aurora sat apart, guilt coiling in her spine. "If I just sleep," she said, "they would all awaken." The prince knelt before her, eyes fierce despite his exhaustion. "And if you surrender, you vanish. You are not their cage, Aurora, you are their hope." His words struck harder than steel. He placed her hand over his heartbeat. "Do you feel that? It stays awake because of you. My kingdom still breathes because of you. I believe in no prophecy, only in the choice you make." For the first time since the curse began, Aurora's shoulders lifted, as if belief itself were a lantern set in her hands. The forest ended in a wall of black thorns, taller than towers, humming with fire. At its center loomed a fortress, its stones fused with bone, its windows glowing with sickly light. "She waits there," the prince said, voice thin. Aurora felt her pulse answer with dread and resolve. They carved their way through, her sword blazing brighter with every cut. The fortress doors opened not with hinges, but with a scream of iron. Inside, the witch sat upon a throne of roots and skulls. "So the child refuses her bed," she sneered. "Then lie in mine." Aurora lifted her sword. Fear licked her, but it could not swallow. The nightmare would finally meet its dreamer. The hall erupted with shadows. They poured from cracks, from tapestries, from her very breath. The prince fought beside her, his blade flashing, but numbers swelled like tide. He cried out as claws dragged him under the swarm. "No!" Aurora screamed, and rage burst her skin into light. Her sword became a torch, her every motion a flare. She cut and cut, not at bodies but at the dark itself, until walls shuddered, pillars cracked. The witch rose, laughter woven into the storm. "Strike, little son," she taunted. "Burn until you are ash." Aurora bared her teeth. If light must consume, then let it be brighter than prophecy could imagine. When the fury broke, the witch's voice filled the ruin. "I too was a princess," she spat. "But forgotten. Cast aside like husks while others feasted. My cradle was weeds, my crown a lie. And when I begged for love, they gave me silence." Her cloak cracked like wings, her eyes raw with wounds centuries deep. "So I cursed you, Aurora. To show them what it means when beauty sleeps. If I cannot be adored, neither shall you." Her bitterness scorched more than her fire. Aurora trembled, but not with fear. She saw herself in the confession, a girl bound by others' choices, yet still able to choose differently. "Then let this tale end not with your spite," she said, "but with my defiance." The witch lunged, her cloak thrashing like storm-torn sails. Shadows clung to her voice. "Sleep, child, and the kingdom wakes. Stay awake, and all will rot with you." Aurora planted her feet. For the first time, her fear did not run, it burned. "I will not sleep," she cried, her voice striking harder than steel. "And I will not let them sleep forever. This tale ends with my hand." She drove her blazing sword into the roots that pulsed beneath the throne. The fortress screamed, walls splitting, thorns catching fire. Light burst outward, swallowing shadow, searing the curse from stone to sky. The witch shrieked as her own storm devoured her. Aurora's veins seared, but she did not falter. She raised her voice above the collapse, a cry that split the dark. "I am awake, and so shall we all be." When the roar subsided, silence returned, but this time, silence broke. A bell tolled from a distant tower, slow and astonished. Then another. The kingdom stirred. Farmers lifted their heads from earth, children rubbed sleep from eyes, lovers clutched each other in wonder. In the palace, the queen gasped awake upon her throne, tears streaking jewels. The king gripped her hand as if fearing it would fade again. Aurora staggered from the ruins, her blade dimmed, her gown torn, skin marked by fire but heart alight. She looked at faces turning toward her, dazed but alive. For the first time, she felt their breaths meet hers, a chorus of dawn singing through one girl who had refused to close her eyes. They would no longer call her Sleeping Beauty. Aurora stood not as a tale of helplessness, but as defiance written in flesh. She had borne the curse, fought the nightmare, and awakened a kingdom, not with a kiss, but with her own will. Legends would call her the Princess of Dawn, the girl who turned silence into song, shadow into light. Children would whisper her name before sleep, not to summon dreams, but to remember courage. For sometimes fairy tales do not need saviors, nor princes with swords. Sometimes they need a girl who refuses the bed prepared for her, who lifts her eyes against fate, and wakes the world by refusing to close them. Everyone knows the old tale, a poor fisherman, a magical golden fish, and a wife whose greed never ceased. But today, let us turn the page. The morning wind whistled through the torn roof of his hut as dawn broke, and a new question arose. What if the fisherman never told his wife? What if he kept the wishes for himself? Would he rise from rags to glory, or stumble from humble longing into the sea of ambition? Morning mist cloaked the sea. The camera followed the old man's calloused hands as he cast his net. Waves slammed against the rocks, wind whistling. He hauled the net, heavy and straining. His heartbeat quickened. Then, a glimmer. The golden fish emerged, scales blazing like molten sunlight. Time slowed. Its mouth opened, voice resonating like a distant harp, "Spare me, and I shall grant you wishes." The old man staggered back, breath shallow, torn between fear and awe, unable to believe what his senses told him. The old man stood frozen, heart racing. In his mind flashed the leaking hut, the thin porridge, his wife's scowling face twisted by hardship. He nearly ran to share the miracle, but his feet seemed glued to the sand. The sea roared, the wind whipped, as if urging him to choose. And for the first time another thought arose: what if I keep this for myself? He looked into the golden fish's eyes, and inside him stirred a fear mixed with an intoxicating thrill he had never known. The old man trembled, eyes still fixed on the golden fish. He dared not ask for grandeur. Instead, he whispered, "I wish for a warm coat." Instantly, from thin air, a cloak appeared, draping over his frail shoulders. The thick fabric embraced his body long accustomed to the cold. He shivered, not from chill but from disbelief. His rough hand traced the seams, each stitch firm as if woven by magic itself. A laugh escaped him, soft, bewildered, like that of a child who touches a miracle for the very first time. The fisherman walked along the shore, cold sand sifting between his toes, the wind stinging his face. Yet for the first time in years, he did not shiver. Warmth seeped from the cloak, as if kindling a heart long numbed by poverty. He laughed aloud, so strange a sound that it startled even him. When had he forgotten that he could still smile? The sea remained the same, the waves still foamed white, yet to his eyes the world seemed a little brighter, a little gentler. He realized, to care for oneself was also a form of happiness. That night, rain lashed the hut, each drop dripping through holes in the roof. The fisherman curled in the darkness, his new coat soaked beneath the leaking ceiling. He gazed around the sagging hut, heart heavy. Then he whispered, "I wish for a small, sturdy home." By morning, where the shack once leaned, a modest wooden cottage stood. Windows shut tight, roof sealed firm, walls fragrant with fresh pine. His wife gaped in shock, questions spilling from her lips. He only smiled and murmured, "The sea changes things." In his eyes glimmered a secret, one that, for the first time, belonged to him alone. In the days that followed, his wife's eyes lingered on him, sharp with suspicion. A house could not simply fall from the sky, she thought. But the old man only smiled quietly, sidestepping her questions. Each dawn he found excuses to walk to the sea, sitting on the sand as waves crashed. Within him, a secret sprouted, growing like a seed in rain. For the first time, he felt he had a world of his own, untouched, inviolate. That secret was sweet, yet perilous, like wine fermenting in the heart. One morning, when his aged hands shook too much to tie the fishing net, he lifted his gaze to the sea. Breath ragged, legs weary, he whispered, "I wish for strength." At once, vigor surged through him, fire racing through his veins. His legs steadied, his arms grew firm, as if youth itself had returned. He spread his arms wide, drawing in the briny air, feeling time roll backward. The waves thundered, and his laughter rang out, bold and free, blending with the eternal voice of the ocean. As strength coursed through him, the old man turned to the golden fish gliding in the surf. His voice trembled, caught between eagerness and fear. "Are 3 wishes, truly all?" The fish tilted, its scales shimmering like countless stars reflected in the sea. It smiled, voice resonant as music rising from the deep, "As long as you desire, I shall grant. The limit lies not in me, but in you." The fisherman froze, eyes igniting with wonder, as though a door to an endless treasury had been flung open. The waves rolled as ever, yet within him, each ripple swelled into a storm of yearning. A new door had opened, and it could lead him to boundless joy, or into an abyss without end. At first, the fisherman dared ask only for the simplest things. He wished for a small garden beside his new house. By morning, rows of fresh vegetables sprouted, leaves swaying in the breeze. Then he wished for a warm meal, grilled fish, bread fresh from the oven, and the air filled with fragrance. Another time, he asked for a sturdy pair of shoes, so his feet would no longer ache on the rocky sand. Each wish, no matter how small, appeared instantly, as effortless as the sea breeze. He burst into laughter, gleeful as a child who has just discovered magic. Poverty, which had seemed his eternal companion, suddenly vanished, replaced by tiny joys so real they almost felt unreal. In the days that followed, the fisherman began to wish more often. One morning he asked for a new boat, gleaming and sturdy, so he could sail without fear of storms. That afternoon, he wished for a pouch of gold, enough to earn respectful glances in the village market. On another day, he wished for friends to visit, to share wine and laughter by his hearth. Joy grew larger with each wish, and he grew accustomed to a world that bent at his command. Within him an undertow stirred, a satisfaction mixed with hunger, swelling larger and larger, like the sea forever reaching for the shore. His wife soon noticed the changes. She saw wealth gathering around them, but her husband grew distant, secretive. Where did the money come from? The house? That new boat, she pressed. The old man only smiled faintly, evading, never letting her touch that hidden world. Once, he had feared her scolding gaze, now, he felt no need to care. Between them an invisible gulf opened, widening like the tide. His wife felt abandoned in the very house that was meant to shelter them, while he reveled in his new joy, a world that belonged only to him and the golden fish. One day, the fisherman stood before the sea and thought no longer of small things. He wished for a seaside mansion with white stone walls, red-tiled roof, and gates carved with ornate detail. He asked for silken robes and chests brimming with gold. He wished for visitors from afar to bow low, calling him Lord. And within a single night, it all appeared. The mansion gleamed under the sun, silk shimmered on his shoulders, and voices of reverence filled his halls. Villagers whispered, "He has changed his fate." Yet in his dazzling eyes flickered a shadow, as though, on the path to power, he had left behind some vital part of himself. Night fell, and in his lavish chamber lined with bronze mirrors, the fisherman stood still, staring at his own reflection. In the glass he saw a man of dignity, silk shimmering, eyes blazing like torches. Yet the longer he gazed, the more he sensed a hollow coldness within those eyes. His smile warped, unfamiliar even to himself. He whispered, voice rough, "Am I any different from my wife back then?" The one who was greedy and never content. The question lingered unanswered, carried away by the wind that whistled through the window, leaving only the echo of doubt. The next morning, he returned to the sea. The golden fish rose from the blue waves, scales flashing brilliant light. It asked, its tone both gentle and insistent, "What else do you desire?" Waves pounded against the sand, their rhythm like drums demanding a response. The old man trembled as though the entire ocean demanded his answer. Ambition still surged within him, yet alongside it crept fear, the fear of being devoured by his own greed. That night, the old man walked alone to the shore. Behind him loomed the grand castle, glowing with lights, before him stretched the vast, dark, tranquil sea. The sea had never changed since the day he was born, only the human heart did. Within his chest, two currents clashed, tearing him apart, one part craving to keep it all, gold, power, respect, another longing for peace, like the old days when he mended nets on the sand. The night wind was biting, but colder still was the struggle within his soul. Standing before the waves, the old man fell to his knees, hands trembling, voice hoarse like the wind itself, "I wish for peace, no more desires to consume me." As the words left his lips, the wind stilled, the sea held its breath. He closed his eyes, tears streaming down to vanish into the sand. A decision had been made, the hardest of his life. In an instant, the grand castle behind him vanished like smoke, gold dissolved like sand slipping through fingers. The gleaming robes faded into simple cloth. Yet instead of despair, he felt his heart grow light. Before him remained only a small wooden house, a green garden, and the gentle sound of waves. He drew a deep breath, and a smile spread across his wrinkled face. For the first time in many years, he truly felt peace. The fisherman realized, the worth of a wish was never in treasure, power, or splendor, but in the moment one chooses to stop. The sea would never cease its waves, but humans must learn contentment. He sat upon the sand, listening to the rhythm of the surf, as though hearing his own heartbeat settle into calm once more. To the world, he was but a gentle old man living by the sea, casting nets like any other fisherman. They never knew he had walked the circle of ambition, touched wealth and power, and then surrendered it all to return to simple joy. In the crimson sunset, he sat mending his net, serenity upon his face. For sometimes, the greatest wish is no wish at all.